Um, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I know Misty has already welcomed you, but I'm going to welcome you again. And thank you so much for being here. Um, just a little introduction. First of all, Kira Carney is going to be talking in a little bit, and we're excited about that. But, frankly, the big thing here to me is that we were able to join up with Isaac Walton League, because I've admired what they do for a long time. I think they do amazing work. And I think the idea of advocacy and really good monitoring and dedicated people doing that is the perfect mixture. And so I'm just happy we're able to do this. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you come from on this. Essentially, there's a wide range of people who I hope we can benefit from what we're going to talk about tonight. If you're already a water monitor and you're an advocate, then you're already in the club. But if you're not in either one of those categories, that's fine. You can get excited about water monitoring, and you can get excited about advocacy and doing both of them at one time. And so whatever club you fall in, whatever category you fall into, that's great. All of Wild Virginia's water advocacy is kind of channeled under a program we call our Campaign for Virginia's Water Future. We kind of went public with this campaign in late 2020. It's hard to believe it's been that long. And the first real action we took was to pick some specific parts of Virginia regulations and the way they do permitting and other things to supposedly protect water quality. And we and others had identified some pretty big holes there, some ways that they don't protect things the way they should. So we decided to go to the State Water Control Board and say, hey, here's a slate of things that just need to be changed. And so that is something that's going to go on. I mean, it's just like with anything with government trying to change things, it can take a long time. And we expected that it would take a long time. We're attacking it in several different ways. For one, obviously, when the state has a process, a permit, a regulatory action that we can be involved in, then we do. And we try to help folks like you be involved also, so that you know what's happening and how you best can play a role. But we also try to create some initiatives ourselves. And so we think that we're kind of hitting all angles of that. And the fact is that people who monitor water quality are perfect for this campaign. The other part of the context here is that we are approaching the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. And we realized that, and we wanted to make a big deal out of that. And we figured the best way to commemorate that and to celebrate it is to get more and more people being advocates to try to make that act count, to try to make the protections that are supposed to be promised to us under the Clean Water Act actually be carried out. And so we're doing a series of things like this, webinars and blogs and other things. This is actually the second in a series, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But I hope you'll stick with us throughout the year leading up to this kind of momentous anniversary. And, I'm probably in a small club in that I'm just an absolutely huge fan of the Clean Water Act. And to be a fan of a law is probably kind of weird and very nerdy, but that's okay. The thing is that a bunch of politicians 50 years ago had a pretty brilliant idea, not just in that they wanted to have a law to protect water, but in the way they did it. And I could go on at way more length than you would like about why that is. But it's a great tool, and there's a lot we can use there. So let's see, why won't it change for me here? I think I skipped, no, okay. So, well, we're up to Kira from Isaac Walton League of America. I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to talk a little bit about their programs and their connection with advocacy. And I think that, Kira, if it's okay with you, after you speak, we'll check the chat and see if there's anybody who has questions before they have to listen to me again. So take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So my name is Kira Carney. I am the Mid-Atlantic Save Our Streams Coordinator. I started this job summer last year, so I'm still learning a ton about water quality work that's being done in Virginia, the great advocacy work that organizations are doing in the state. So I'm excited to be here and tell you about our little slice. So I'll do a really quick overview of our programs. I've included a lot of links in the slides. So once it gets sent around, you'll be able to continue to explore our resources and everything. So you can go to the next slide.
Whoops. Oh, there we go.
So I work for the Isaac Walton League of America. And if you hadn't heard of us, this is our 100th year. We were founded in 1922 by 54 anglers in Chicago who were seeing their natural environment being degraded, their sport and their kind of ability to do their pastime being degraded as well. And they wanted to take action to continue to protect the natural resources that they so loved in order to make sure that future generations had access to it as well. So nationally as an organization, our chapters focus on a wide range of things in conservation. So we have an agriculture program. I work in the clean water department, but we're really just a huge network of conservationists and sportsmen who really like to work on conserving our natural resources and participate in advocacy and conservation. So we have over 200 chapters across the country with over 41,000 members. In Virginia, we have 17 chapters with over 8,600 members. And the Arlington Fairfax chapter is the biggest in the country. So that's one little thing that Virginia has. So yeah, we do our work through advocacy efforts, education, and on-the-ground conservation projects. And what I'm going to talk to you all about today is our community science projects. Next slide. So to give you context a little bit more about what we do in Virginia is that we're also part of the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative. And so this is a collaborative group of organizations, you can see there in the bottom, that are working to amplify the power of community science in watershed protection. So we all coordinate programs that get volunteers to go out and collect data, and we provide really high quality protocols for that data collection so that that data is reliable and useful to organizations like the Chesapeake Bay Program, Department of Environmental Qualities, and such. Next program, or next slide.
Whoops, sorry. Did I go too far?
Nope, that's perfect.
Okay.
So
sorry.
if you're wondering why monitoring is important, it's good to know that only 19% of waterways are monitored professionally in the country. And so that leaves a huge gap of data and waterway health that we just don't know. And so having the kind of massive force of a volunteer, collection, going out and collecting data helps us fill those gaps in understanding and helps paint a better picture of water quality in the country and in Virginia. So monitoring helps us assess the health of our local waterways. It helps us document changes in stream health over time. It can be helpful in prioritizing places for restoration and intervention. It can help document the success of any projects restoration that we implement. And our volunteer monitors are really kind of the boots on the ground, the eyes and ears in your communities to be out there seeing changes. So if something particularly significant were to happen, like a spill or a significant pollution event, you would be the eyes on the ground that get to notify the community about that. Next slide. Maybe one back.
Oh, sorry, it's bulky.
No worries. So this is a great visual to help kind of show the power of volunteer monitoring. So the blue dots show where the Chesapeake Bay program has official monitoring sites, and the purple dots are where us in the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative have volunteer and non-traditional monitoring. So you can see we are able to cover a much wider swath of land and get a lot more data with that kind of volunteer workforce, which is really helpful. Next slide. So as you're getting into water quality monitoring, there are 3 types that you can go into. We have many that do a combination of 2 or do all 3 or just do 1. You know, it's really up to what your interest and ability is. Physical monitoring is kind of the visual assessments of streams, looking at erosion levels, stream bank health, how much tree shade is available, stuff like that, visual assessments. There's chemical monitoring and there's biological monitoring, which are the ones I'm going to go into more detail today. Next slide. Oh, one back.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So chemical monitoring in Virginia is actually coordinated by our partners at the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. They run the River Trends Chemical Monitoring Program. And this program, monitors go out monthly to test for temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, water clarity, salinity, and sometimes bacteria. Nutrient pollution can also be monitored, but I think that's less common. And this consistent monitoring helps identify really long-term trends of water quality. Chemical monitoring is kind of like taking a snapshot of the chemical composition of the water at that moment. So doing it really consistently helps us see trends and patterns of our area, but it can also be really helpful in alerting you to a change. So if there is a specific pollution event or a spike in a certain pollutant, it can kind of help you identify that and act on it to reduce it or eliminate it. So you can actually request a River Trends training on their website, and they'll come to you. You can go to them as well, and they'll host a training for your organization to get certified in their protocol. Next slide. And then the program that I coordinate in Virginia is the Save Our Streams program, and this is biological monitoring. So when we're out doing a biological monitoring collection, we are looking at aquatic benthic macroinvertebrates. So I know that's a long word, but it's basically just means that they live in water, they bottom dwell, which means they kind of cling to the rocks and the substrate of the stream. They're big enough to see with the naked eye, and they are invertebrates, which means they have no backbone. So biological monitoring is really helpful because these macros have varying sensitivities to pollution. So we get to look at them, collect them in our net, count them and identify them, and we're able to see kind of a long-term trend of stream health based on the population densities of certain species of the macros. So because they are bottom dwelling, they stay in one spot in that stream for significant portions of their life cycle. They, throughout their life cycle, are coping with the chemical and physical characteristics of that stream. If something were to happen in terms of pollutants, they don't necessarily have the ability to swim away like a fish would. So because they are kind of exposed and living in the stream for a longer period of time, which ones we find when we do that collection are really indicative of the stream health. So when we go out and we collect and we see a really high population density of pollution tolerant macros, we can deduce that there might be a high pollution in that stream because they're only tolerant species. On the flip side, if we go out and there is a significant portion of highly pollution sensitive species, we can deduce that it might be a really healthy stream because those species that are present are really sensitive and they wouldn't be there if pollution was really high. So in this protocol, you go out twice a year in the spring and fall to collect, identify, and count those macroinvertebrates. You send that data to us at the Save Our Streams program. And you can also mark your calendar because on April 9th, we will be hosting a training for benthic monitoring with Wild Virginia, which we're really excited about. It will be in the Richmond area. Exact time and location is still TBD. Next slide. So these protocols are kind of what we recommend in Virginia because the Save Our Streams and the River Trends programs both have protocols that have quality assurance project plans that have been submitted and accepted by the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. So we've submitted these protocols and an outline of our monitoring system to DEQ, and they've accepted it as a high quality and rigorous way to collect data. So when we certify our monitors in our protocols, we're able to verify that our monitors are collecting high quality data, and then it's more useful, and DEQ actually accepts our data to use in their own reporting and their own evaluations. And if you're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, of course, it will go to the Chesapeake Bay program as well. Next slide. So if you don't have time for the trainings or kind of the commitment of the 2 times a year or the monthly monitoring that Save Our Streams and River Trends offers, we have a couple of water quality monitoring programs that require no training and no experience. One is the Winter Salt Watch. So this is a program where you can be sent a free kit to actually go out into your stream and test to see the concentration of chlorides in your stream. And so this helps us see how much road salt is actually washing into our streams every winter. This is really important because it's not good for wildlife. It's not good for that kind of those macroinvertebrates that need a healthy stream to survive, but it can also get into our drinking water supplies, which can cause issues in our pipes. It can cause corrosion. It can cause infrastructural issues. And we really want to make sure that we're reducing the amount of salt that we're using every year. So you can request a free kit to see what your streams are right now. You can also download the Creek Critters app. And so this app is a great way to get into benthic macroinvertebrate monitoring without the training, because you can actually use the app to go out to your stream. It guides you through the whole process of picking up macros, identifying them. It'll help you go through the process of figuring out which one's which. And then it'll also give you a real-time stream health score based on the ones that you find. It's not a quality assured process, so that data does not go to DEQ, but it's a great way to, pun intended, dip your toes into water monitoring. Next slide. So we really, really want to make sure that monitors are going out and making opportunities to use their data to influence change in Virginia. So Dave's really going to go into that today, but some of the things that we suggest are using your data to really identify pollution hotspots or pollution events so that you know where to target your energy in. You can also use that data to build community support, to kind of build buy-in for stakeholders in your community, and really kind of activate the community if there's an issue. You can also monitor new development. So if there are things like a new highway, a new shopping development, a pipeline, if things like that are proposed in your community, you can monitor to get a baseline of your stream health. And as those developments are occurring, you can continue to monitor and see if stream health is impacted. So that's a great way to kind of hold developers accountable to the impact that they're having on stream health. And lastly, data is just really another tool in your advocacy toolbox. So as you're going through and having conversations, it's really helpful to have data to support your claims and to really kind of elevate your work as you go through as an advocate. So we have a great advocacy guide on our website that has lots of information about who to contact, how to be an advocate, how to, garner support in your community and, put together talking points. It also has a couple of great case studies for how monitors have used chemical or biological monitoring to kind of create advocacy successes in their community. So I definitely recommend you check that out. And yeah, I think that's the end of my spiel, and I'm really excited to hear what Dave has to say. We're really trying to elevate how much our monitors are able to use our data. So I'm really hoping that Dave has some great things to tell us today that'll help everybody.
Well, thanks. That's great. And as I say, if we can stop and see if there's any questions, are you able to help with that, Misty? Or
yeah, I have not had any questions except that folks were having a little trouble with audio at some point. So I just wanted to let them know that I'm here to help. And I've been private messaging anybody that's having a hard time, but it's been fine for me, I think, and most folks.
Okay.
Okay.
Great,
Well,
thanks.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I had a question, if nobody else does, for Kira. like you say, I know you have a lot of chapters, and I have met and kind of encountered folks from different chapters in different advocacy work. Can you say a little bit about how chapters versus the national group or the regional group, how they operate in regards to advocacy?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a pretty unique structure, I think. So each of our chapters is considered an independent 501c3 nonprofit. So they all are able to work completely independently to what we're doing at headquarters. But we do convene every year to vote and to kind of discuss what our overarching bylaws and protocols will be. So we operate under kind of our common pillars. The national groups all come together every year in our convention to decide what our priorities are going to be as an organization. So at the headquarters where I work, we have a small staff that really works on conservation issues based on what the organization as a whole has prioritized. But the work that each individual group does is kind of separate from us, and they do incredible work in their communities with schools. They do youth group programming, shooting lessons. They do a lot with scouts, I believe. So yeah, they do a lot of great work as well.
Great. Okay, well, thanks. And I will say again that I have known about Isaac Walton's program for a long time. And I'll say that when I used to work for the state of Virginia as a regulator, I did a lot of these kinds of things as a professional. And then I took the Isaac Walton training several years ago just to see how it worked. And it's a great program. It's rigorous, and you will get good training. So be assured of that. You know, I think we always say that people who spend time outdoors, who hike or who fish or who camp, probably are the best advocates for natural areas. And that's certainly true, I think, for water monitors, because you get to know places and you get to value them in ways that you might not otherwise. Plus, you know things about them that not everybody else is going to know. In fact, you know, as Kira said, the state or the federal government or any other entity, they can only cover so many places as far as water quality monitoring, and they just don't know about what's going on in some of these places. I can tell you that, for example, in regards to the major pipelines that we have worked a lot on, you know, there were many times where folks would tell us, hey, their list of streams and springs and things is so incomplete. I've got 3 of them on our land and they never even identified them, you know. So if they don't even know where all the water bodies are, then they clearly don't know the conditions and what's impacting them. I think another great thing about being a water monitoring, being kind of an ambassador for, you know, trying to change things, is that people will pay attention to you. I can talk about law all day, and it's going to be better if you tell them about the cool stream and take them there. So you're a really good influence. Kids will flock to you if you can show them some bugs or some other techniques for monitoring. So you're the perfect people. If you are a monitor or want to be one, then you should also be an advocate. I'll say the other thing is that some people believe that if you're going to be a scientist, a citizen scientist or a professional scientist, that you can't also be an advocate. And I soundly reject that. Yes, you need to follow procedures. Yes, you need to be able to say what you did and how you did it and why you did it, and document your procedures, but that doesn't mean that you can't also take that information and advocate for improvements. Again, Kira told you about a number of ways that we monitor water, and you know, there are more than this list even. But one of the points I like to get across is that, you know, frankly, even the state and even a lot of other folks want you to believe that water quality monitoring is a fairly narrow thing, that only if you are out there taking samples and getting quantitative chemical analysis. Only if you have, really good training are you collecting information that matters. And that's just not true. The fact is that, in many cases, going out and taking some photographs and writing a description of what you see can be incredibly valuable. And one of the things I always remind people of is, even if I'm, a trained scientist and I go out and I monitor the bugs and I take chemical samples, I won't ignore what I see and smell and feel out there. Those are part of the picture. And you don't have to know the whole picture. If you want to monitor your local waters or whatever, you're feeling part of that. One other thing, the Clean Water Act essentially says that waters need to be protected so that they're sustainable, so that aquatic life can live there and survive. But they also say they're supposed to be protected so that we can use them for beneficial uses. So if a stream is not usable because it's gunked up with algae, or because it's got sewage and it smells horrible, or whatever reason like that, then that in itself is a problem, and your observation of that is valid data. For example, we know there are places where, and I'm going to talk about later, the Shenandoah Valley, where we've got a lot of algae problems and have had for years. There are places where you can't at times paddle through an area because the algae is so thick. Now, that's not necessarily a quantitative measure, but I can easily, as both a kind of a trained scientist, as an attorney, say that's valid data. That matters. And so all I'm saying, at probably greater length than I need to, is don't limit your view of what science is. One of the things I always tell people too is that kind of thinking about the context, whatever kind of data you collect. If you go and you do benthic macroinvertebrate surveys, if you measure stream flows, if you do whatever else, if you want to put that in the context of what else is going on, there's a lot of other information out there. And that's part of why I say is that you don't have to draw the whole picture. You can combine what you find with what other people are providing. For example, if you're looking at your stream in your neighborhood, and you think maybe there's a problem, you see that there are bad results in your monitoring, going and looking around in your watershed is going to help figure out that picture. The other thing is that when you do monitoring, you don't have to stop with that. You can say, hey, this seems to indicate a problem. I'm not an expert, but this seems like there's something going on here that can lead to further work, maybe more professional, more intensive monitoring by other folks. What Kira was describing, that their data is accepted by the Virginia DEP and goes to the Chesapeake Bay program, that's kind of what this is about. The state is required under the Clean Water Act to every 2 years do a statewide water quality assessment. And they also come up with a list of what are designated as impaired waters, places where standards aren't met. And so reasonably and understandably, they want to have some guidelines as to the quality of data that they're going to use. So the data that they collect is incorporated into these reports. And if citizen groups like Isaac Walton and a number of other groups, in fact, there's a pretty good list of folks who have gone through a process, and the groups have some level of training and documentation so that DEQ feels comfortable using their data. So that's a good thing. But again, you don't have to stop there. There are other valid ways to collect data, and there are other valid ways to use it beyond that. You'll see this list here is that DEQ talks about what they can do or what they might do with that data that you collect. But I will tell you that even if you haven't gone through that process, you can still bring your data to DEQ, to the State Water Control Board, and say, here's how we collected it. Here's why you should pay attention to it. And they can't just cover their eyes just because you haven't gone through their formal process. That's not to say it's not valuable, but just don't stop there. One of the big reasons that people do monitoring is they see something that is about to happen in their area. They're concerned about impacts that might be caused to their streams or their area, or they're already seeing problems. And so I'm just putting these as a couple of examples. We were privileged to be able to join up with Trout Unlimited and West Virginia Rivers over the last 5 years, I guess it is now, a little more than 5 years, in a program to look at streams and to do a certain protocol of monitoring to first figure out the background levels or the baseline in streams that might be affected by the 2 huge natural gas pipelines that were proposed in Virginia. You may know that one of those did not happen. So a lot of data was collected along the path of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline that thankfully never had to be followed up with then impacts from that pipeline. But along the Mountain Valley Pipeline route, we've had folks for the last, like I say, since I think at least 2017, maybe late 2016, doing a protocol of monitoring with some chemical and physical parameters. They don't do biological monitoring. And they did it before any impacts were found, and they've been doing it since. And so that's been a very valuable thing. The other kind of monitoring, and again, I think there's a lot of overlap between what we think and what Isaac Walton thinks, which is great. You mentioned, basically visual assessments. And so we've used that a lot. And there's a group called Mountain Valley Watch that is devoted to being out there and to trying to find problems along the Mountain Valley Pipeline, report them, and try to get them solved. So that's another program where they're not necessarily going and sampling a stream for a specific, parameter or looking at the biota, but they're able to detect huge problems. And a lot of that's been documented. And I will say that, again, those aren't necessarily programs that were somehow certified by the state, but those observations, that data has been used. The State Water Control Board members have seen those photographs, and don't get me started on whether they've done the right thing or not, because they haven't necessarily, but it has brought these issues out to them and to the public in ways that has been really important. I see an awful lot of a big number of things in the chat. Is there anything there that we should address, Misty?
Yeah, so someone was asking a couple different times here, why is the Clean Water Act not able to protect places like the Roanoke River, for example, from things like the Mountain Valley Pipeline?
That's a good question. And that's what I spend almost every day trying to think about and trying to solve. The simple fact is that a law is only as good as its implementation. We have some agencies who are supposed to carry out the mandates of that law. And it should be no secret that we don't think they've done that, that being the Virginia DEQ, federal agencies who have responsibilities. So you're right. It has not protected those resources and many more in the way that it should. We just all have to be continue to persevere as advocates and push for the right thing. I've been doing this a little over 40 years, and if I was going to get frustrated over the fact that sometimes it doesn't work, I'd have gone away long ago. But it's a good question, and it's another good reason to make sure that we bring these things together. Good monitoring people who know about their water bodies and making the arguments and making the observations count in advocacy. Anything else that we can hit right now?
Yeah, here's another good kind of bigger picture question. Someone's saying, I saw some milky sludge draining into a stream. Where do I start to report that, right? What's the best place to report something like that?
The first person, or the first place, I believe, is the Virginia DEQ. And while I will criticize DEQ, they do have people who respond. They do have people who that's their duty, is to go out and check on pollution incidents. So you can find on DEQ's website information about where to report those things. They have regional offices across the state, so they can usually get there fairly quickly. The other thing is that your locality, whether you're in a city or a county, very often folks with the county, they're in different departments, but sometimes with the planning department or the erosion sediment control program, a lot of times it's good to let them know things like that too. So that's where I would start.
Yeah, I'll try to find the link to that and share that too, if there's a clear link on the DEQ website.
Yeah.
All the other questions revolved around, if you wanted to get involved, where would you find your local chapter? And Kira did a great job answering that in the chat. We'll send those links out too. And some other folks were asking if we could share the slides, and we will definitely share those tomorrow as well. So that's it.
Yeah, I should have said that at the beginning, is that we're as you know, we're recording this and we're glad to share that. So please pass it along to people who might be interested. We are going to send you a note afterwards sometime tomorrow, I think, that will give you more links and resources so that you can look into these things further. Another way that data that might be collected through any of these programs, through the kind of thing that I was describing with Trout Unlimited and West Virginia Rivers, Isaac Walton League, the many other groups that collect data, is that we, and even some of our attorneys who work on cases, are able to kind of mine that information and use it in informal ways. Comments to regulatory agencies. In this case, it was comments to the Corps of Engineers about that very Mountain Valley pipeline and the proposals to dig and blast through those streams. We used data that has been collected over those last 5 years to say, here are the kind of problems that have already existed. And so, it has been useful and will continue to be useful. I will say also that in the many cases that we've filed already on MVP, that we've been able to use some of that citizen science. And again, that's just a demonstration that that program is something separate from what DEQ said it will adhere to. But that doesn't mean the court won't pay attention to it. That doesn't mean that you can't put it forward, as long as you can explain where it came from and document the value of it. One of the things I keep reminding DEQ about is that very often I can take evidence and verify, for example, if you bring me a photo of a stream and pollution in that stream, that's valid evidence, and a court will take that at the drop of a hat, as long as you have somebody who can say, yes, I took this photo. Yes, it represents what I was able to see that day when I was there. DEQ has in general refused to use those kinds of evidence. And so not meaning to beat up on DEQ unduly, but I'm just going back to the idea that don't take no for an answer when you have something valid that you can take forward. There are different ways to take your information and try to make it count as an advocate. If you're not familiar, the second line here about standing. When we bring a court case, or when anybody brings a court case on an environmental issue, you need to have folks, say as a member of IAWA Virginia, or as another one of the groups that is bringing the lawsuit, you need to have members who can say, I have a direct and a real interest in these environments that we're trying to protect. And so in every one of the cases that we're involved with, we find people who are members of IAWA Virginia who can say, yeah, I go to this stream. Yeah, I care about this place. And many of them have been water monitors. Many of them have been ones, some of them have been part of the Isaac Walton program. Many of them have been part of the Trout Unlimited program. Because you can easily explain that, yeah, obviously I care about this place because I go out there every month, or I go out there every quarter, and I look at it and I'm going to keep doing it because I've proven that it matters to me. So I'll put in a plug that if you're a water monitor, or if you become a water monitor, you know, think about the fact that, you know, that's a place you can speak for, essentially, in a legal sense. There have been times in the past when we have asked people to kind of answer a questionnaire about what are the places you care most about, and would you possibly be willing to speak for them in a lawsuit. And so maybe that's something else that we should do again, Misty. Sometimes it's kind of hard to explain to people what that's all about, but again, you're being a spokesperson. You know, again, when you're a group, or when you're part of an organization, or a process where you're doing monitoring, you can come out with your own reports, and you can characterize things. You can aim them in whatever way you want. It's valuable to get them counted under the state's reporting, but also doing your own reporting and bringing out the issues that you care about is really valuable. I just picked several here, that all of which I know to be really good quality information, and really good for learning about what's going on in those areas. And the thing to remember too is that you're not just trying to influence what DEQ does or what some government entity does. You're trying to make sure that your fellow citizens and your neighbors and your you know, the folks in your area understand what's going on with your waters. And so this is, advocacy can be, you know, kind of a narrow legal regulatory sense, but it's also a public activity. It's a chance to make your case, like I say, to your friends and your neighbors and your allies out there. And so doing your own report, getting your word out can be really valuable. I have actually seen people who were water monitors in different areas, different places, who've gotten involved in their own local planning processes. And they will say, okay, when you're coming up with your new plan or your new zoning maps, we know that these are waters that are really good quality. So you should pay attention to that. You should put them in a special category, or you should factor that into the ways that you make local government decisions. And that's valuable. You know, the fact is that sometimes you can have the greatest impact at that level of government, because again, that's the thing that's closest to you. By the way, I didn't pick these two because I had specific examples. They were just good photos. Uh, but that's a valuable thing. The other thing is, like I say, your local government people, just like the folks in your neighborhood and your community, they know these water bodies pretty well. So they're good resources and they're good folks to help understand what you're seeing out there in the waters. It's good to have a good relationship with them if you can. This is kind of cut off for me here, but what I'm getting, there's two things here. The first thing at the top there is that DEQ every year will come out with an announcement and they'll say, hey, we're developing our general monitoring plan for the next year. Tell us where you think we should go monitor. One of the things you can do, especially if you're already out there doing your own monitoring, is you can say, hey, we're finding concerns in this area. We're finding these kinds of results. And even though they might not be getting into your official reports, there's something that should lead to a next step. You know, I'm out here seeing every time it rains, I'm out here seeing, you know, mud or cloudy material or whatever in this stream. State, put that on your list for a place to monitor maybe. So that's a formal process where you can kind of try to take your information and feed it into their system and get a next step going. Another thing you can do, and this is an example that I had long experience with, and I mentioned before, is that folks have seen for years in the Shenandoah Valley, in the Shenandoah River and many of its major streams, fairly severe algae problems. And so the Shenandoah Riverkeeper and other folks, including, I know, some local Isaac Walton folks, Trout Unlimited folks, all kinds of folks, started basically saying, we're going to document this because something's got to be done. And frankly, they met with a lot of resistance. But through the years, there have been thousands of photos and hundreds of testimonials and some, you know, some physical and chemical and biological monitoring done. It wasn't done as part of an established program like Isaac Walton's or some of the others, but it was basically all gathered around this concern that there's real problems here. We got to document it, and we're going to insist that something be done about it. And so that's been going on, frankly, since before 2010. And for years, the DEQ, I don't know what happened to my wording here. For years, the DEQ has resisted taking a lot of that information, again, people's photographs and people's testimonials, and they have said, that's anecdotal. We can't use that. We have to have quantitative measures. We have to have science. And that's part of the reason that I dwell on that theme, is that, you know, all that information in aggregate was really important. It was really credible. And by taking it forward and continuing to advocate to say, both state and EPA, you got to pay attention to that. We finally, through these many years, have gotten the DEQ to take that next step. What they did in 2018, 2019 is they finally said, yes, we'll acknowledge that all this evidence you put forward seems to show a problem. Now we'll go do our great monitoring and we'll decide what the real problem is. So it's a little bit of a story of frustration because there was good information, there was good data collected through the years, and it took a lot of perseverance and patience to finally make it go forward. But what we now have is the state proposing some real new water quality criteria that will help to get at those problems. So that's a success story of people collecting their own data, putting it forward, although it's a frustrating and long-term success story. We hope they don't always take that long, but it can work. Let's put it that way. One of the things that we have said is that when there are regulatory or regulated parties out there, in many cases, when there's the indication that there's a problem, they should be going out there and doing monitoring. You know, again, you look at that map that Kira showed us of where the state and probably EPA and others do monitoring. There's so many places that don't get sampled or monitored. This is one of my favorite examples because this is something that I was just able to grab off of Google Earth. I happen to know that this facility, this paper plant on the James River, spews this black liquid into the river. And you can go on Google Earth through time and find it consistently spewing into this river. We assert that that violates the Clean Water Act and Virginia law. And so what we are starting to do is to advocate to the state, these guys have to go out and do monitoring to show how this acts, how it affects this stream, how it changes through time. So as I say, your observations, your measurements, however you happen to do them, can be a kind of a bridge, kind of a trigger to push for other improvements and other people to go do more thorough monitoring. So it's valuable, and we think that we're going to be able to get some results here. Okay. Whoops, I'm jumping all around, not meaning to. Okay, one other kind of thing that people do, and now Kira, you said you guys do bacterial. No, some other folks do bacterial monitoring. You don't do it. For example, the Rivanna River Alliance here in our area, in the Charlottesville area, they do bacterial monitoring. There's quite a few other folks who do that. And that's not necessarily a real, a real complicated thing. And a lot of folks find it useful. You can take those results and you can publicize them. One of the things that waterkeepers in the whole Chesapeake area started to do is to use an app, so that when their groups go out and monitor bacteria at a beach or at a swimming area, they upload it. And that can be a warning to the folks in that area. And that's a gap that needs to be filled because you don't always get that kind of quick information and usable information from the authorities that we should have. So that's a pretty broad range of kinds of ways that whatever data you choose to collect can be fed into a system or can be used by you to try to advocate for improvements. And so again, my advice is to think expansively, think about what can be effective, because there's lots of different approaches to how you do monitoring and how you use those data once you get them. And look for good groups. That's a good way to start. There's something. Have you been involved with the group that does the yearly water quality monitoring conference for citizens here in Virginia, Kira?
I think the Alliance might help host that. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah. So I guess the point is there is a good community out there, and I think that we can give you some more information if you're not sure where to go, if you're not sure if anybody's doing it in your community. There's a lot of resources, and we can try to help you figure out where some of those are. Okay. Before we talk about, I'm sorry, I keep hitting this thing and it jumps all over the place. Before we go to those next couple slides, are there more questions and things that we can try to hit?
There are, yeah. So one person's bringing up something we've been hearing a lot about lately. Their county government set to approve an agricultural zone for a data center, right? We hear about more and more of these. And they're wondering, how do you get the DEQ to start a water study? They're concerned about their water. They have a stream on their property and they're just not sure how to get that going.
Yeah. I mean, part of it, again, can be what can you bring to them? What information can you bring to them about your water body? If you know that it's a really high quality place, if you know that it's used for certain things, then that can be something that you can use to try to convince DEQ to do that. Now, I won't say that in every case where you're concerned about your stream, you're going to get the DEQ to be doing a study. What I will say is that if they are permitting an activity, then they have to be explaining how it's going to affect the local water bodies. And so that's one place as an advocate to step in and say, hold on a minute, unless you do some data gathering, unless you look at these factors, you don't have the information you need. So you can ask them, you can say, here are the values that are of concern, here are the resources, but you probably need to get involved in that particular permitting issue and try to make your argument that they just haven't met their burden of proof as to what's going to happen to those water bodies.
Great. That was a great question. Here's another follow-up to that. Why does the DEQ tend to take so long looking into cases?
Again, there's a combination of resource shortages, kind of dedication to the way they do things versus being responsive. Explaining how bureaucracy works is beyond the capability of this webinar. But the way to get results and the way we always are trying to get people to learn how to be advocates is that old thing, a squeaky wheel can get some grease. Knowing where to go, knowing what kind of information to bring forward, and when you can bring your comments and how to push that forward is the only way to make things happen. And it's frustrating, I know, but I can't give you silver bullets.
Well, and the next questions both revolve around bacterial water quality monitoring. Someone wants to know how to get involved with that in this area. And then folks are also wondering if that works with pollution running off of landfills. That'd be something you could use for that.
Okay, the first part, when you say this area,
I guess here, I don't know, it doesn't say. I know.
That's a big question. If you're in the Charlottesville and the Ravenna River watershed, the Ravenna Conservation Alliance, that's the correct name, right? Because they've changed their name. They do biological monitoring or bacterial monitoring. So they are great at that. They have a good program, both of biological or bacterial monitoring and biological monitoring. So very high on them. If you're in another area, let us know where you are, and I'll try to figure out who you can talk to. Now, when it comes to landfills, whether they're community sanitary landfills or whatever, they have a whole stew of things that may come out of them. Usually bacteria is not the top of the list, although it could well be a concern. But if there's water leaking out of a landfill, it could cause a lot of problems. So if you know that that's happening, I would take that forward. I would go to the DEQ and and report that. That's something that, and there's a lot of old landfills out there that could be a real concern. Anything else for now?
Yes, our dog just met a visitor. So there's one last one. Someone wanted to know where they can learn more about the James River Mill situation, the one you showed on the Google Earth slide.
Yeah. Stay tuned. Actually, send me your information. We are developing comments. We're going to be looking at the permit. They're going to be asking for their permit to be renewed this year. Those discharge permits last for 5 years. They're going to be coming due for a new permit, and we, meaning Wild Virginia, are going to be insisting on improvements. And so I'd be glad to have your information. If you've ever encountered that situation, you might be able to help me, because you might be a person who can say, hey, this has infected me. This has been a problem for me using this river. But we will be working on that for the next 6 months leading up to that permit. So if you're interested, let me know.
Great. And that's it. There's been a lot of good discussion in the chat with folks that know about other groups and stuff, but we'll send out what we've got. And also I encourage people to read through that. So yeah, that's it for now.
And we can, you can save that chat stuff, because I would like to read it. I probably would need some stuff. Okay, we're getting close to time, but I did want to say a little bit about that training that Kira mentioned. We are shooting for April 9th, and really excited about that. We have a lot of good friends in the Richmond area, and so we'll be letting you know the details as that comes forward, and I highly recommend it. And then finally, leading up to that 50th anniversary, this is just one step in that. We've already done one of our webinars, how to use the Freedom of Information Acts, both state and federal. We did that last month, and we have a recording of that. So if you're interested, we also have information on our website about that. And then we have one coming up next month about how to write effective public comments. And I should have put the date there, but we'll give you that in the follow-up email also. But I solicit ideas. If there are things that you've been wondering, and probably some of these ideas that are banging around on the chat, that would help you understand how to be a better advocate. We'd like to hear about them, because we want to meet the needs that people see out there. And there's a lot to learn. But you can be an effective advocate, and we want to help you do that. So again, I'll repeat what Misty started with. Please show up. This lady, this doctor, is an amazing person. I've seen her on television. She's brave. She is a hero, essentially. And for her to come speak for us is a great honor. So I hope you'll show up. And that's me. We'll get you in our follow-up email. We'll get you information for me, for Kira, and for some other resources that hopefully will help you. And with that, I think we're about out of time. But thanks everybody so much for being here. Thanks again, Kira, for your good information. And I guess that's about it.